people pray for strength and guidance. They should pray for the mercy of a swift death.
So, Jay, tell us, what was the first thought that came to mind when you wanted to recreate or make another Diablo? What was the essence of Diablo, and what did you want to bring? What changes did you want to bring?
Well, I think our first thought was don't screw it up. So, originally we really, very first thing we focused on was establishing what we thought were the core elements of Diablo, the high-level things that really defined the games. So things like replayability through randomness and customization of characters, the item game, the approachability of the gameplay, the isometric camera. These are all things that we felt were like core to the Diablo series. And then once we figured that out, we really focused on, okay, what do we want to make better or add to the game? One of the first ones was that we really wanted to make a better action game. We felt like there was a lot of depth that we could explore by looking at other action games that we liked, and then also make a better role-playing game by doing, again, the same thing. Is look at what other role-playing games are doing, provide better quests that affect gameplay more, provide more storytelling within the world, and allow the player to really feel like their actions have a context and their character is a real entity who lives within the world.
So if in terms of gameplay, you said you wanted to make a better action game, what kind of things more specifically would that be?
Well, if you look at Diablo 2, essentially the player could run super fast, could teleport away from almost any threat, had almost infinite health through the potion system, and almost infinite power through the potion system. As a designer trying to challenge that kind of player, we really only had one option, which is kill them. Because anything less than that was really not a challenge. And I think any hardcore D2 player knows this, is that so much of their life is basically avoiding the one-shot kills that occur within the game. Hardcore mode certainly made that interesting, but if you have to go that far to make something interesting, it speaks to something kind of broken in the core game design. And that's not to say we wouldn't have a hardcore mode. We'll probably have that. But what we focused on here is a health system that gives the player a little bit more vulnerability. So we took out the potion system. We do have potions in the game, but they're a lot less powerful than they used to be. And essentially what the player has to do is we drop these health globes off of enemies. And they're probably about a 25-35% drop chance, and they don't affect treasure at all. But they drop off of enemies, and then you have to pick them up to recover health. And what they do is they create a lot more tactical situations where the player will have a big line of monsters between them and the health that they need. And that allows us to create different kinds of monsters that are designed to block you, monsters that are designed to control your movement, and monsters that actually don't have to do a lot of damage to be threatening. And so that's a big focus. In the long run, it adds a lot of combat depth.
So one of the other things about Diablo that makes it special is playing it with your friends. How are you expanding on that experience?
Well, cooperative play is one of our big focuses. When we defined the core of what Diablo was, cooperative play was one of those things. So we've had a lot of questions since we've said that statement about single player, and the interesting thing for us is that single player and cooperative play we really design for both simultaneously all the time.
Cain, you still live.
Ah, there you are. The writings in this place are incredible. Come, stay a while and...
It is time for shedding our enemy's blood, not idle talk.
No one ever listens.
So it's not that one's more important, it's that we always make sure that every system works for both. Every skill works for both. But we think about how can this skill be beneficial in cooperative play versus how can it be beneficial in single play. The health system is a great example. The health globes that drop in the world, we didn't want players fighting over them because that makes players not want to play together. So whenever you pick up a health globe, it not only heals you, it heals any players who are near you. So you can actually pick up health globes to help out your teammates. So another element was with items. In Diablo 2, there was a lot of fighting over items because items would drop and whoever got to it first got it. We didn't want any kind of situations like that we feel really harmed the cooperative game more than helped it. And certainly there are some players who liked that, and there is a fun element to trying to get to the item first.
And it's also a bonding experience when you actually play with someone who allows you to pick the stuff that you need. And
exactly, but far more often than the person who's nice to you is the person who takes all your loot and leaves the game, and that just makes you not want to play with other people. And so we're really trying to avoid any kind of system that makes players not like each other. And so that in cooperative play, we really focus on a system that allows people to play together. Now, eventually we'll put in PvP systems that are more dedicated as well, and we don't really have any kind of details about that now. But we'll make those, just as hardcore and competitive as a lot of our other Blizzard games, so that players who just want to screw the crap out of each other will have a place to go and do it. But we don't want players who want to screw the crap out of people with our players who just want to have a good cooperative experience. That's sacrificing the fun of everyone for the fun of a minority, and it's just not a good decision overall.
So I'm sure you've been asked this question a lot of times today, but the color scheme and the petitions from some of the fans that didn't like the color scheme and the tone of the new game, what is your response to that, and how do you feel? What is the idea behind the slightly different color scheme?
Well, we went through several art revisions, and I think some of them were probably closer to what those fans asked for. But in the end, what we found was that when we went with a dark, kind of gritty, gray-brown environment, we found that the environment became very monotonous over time. And Diablo is a game you spend a lot of time in, so monotony is our enemy. We also found that things like identifying players from monsters and monsters from each other, those are very critical, important elements, is really difficult when you have a very flat, colorless art style. When we had these problems, one of the things we did was we went back to Diablo 2 and looked at it again and found, this game isn't colorless at all. And the memory people have of Diablo 2 is very different than the actuality. They tend to remember things like the Act 1 dungeons and caves, which are very gray, but they also tend to forget that the monsters were the Fallen were bright red, and the Corrupt Rogues were bright white, and a lot of there were blue enemies and bright green, and each enemy had a vastly different, very garish color scheme, and it was to help you identify them. A lot of that kind of garish coloring doesn't translate very well to true 3D, higher resolution graphics. A lot of the light models that they use for Diablo 2 don't translate either, because they're not real light models. They're faked, and they're done in the style that befits a 2D game. But so once we went over to 3D, some things didn't work. Like pulling over garish coloring for monster identification looked horrible. So what we found was we generally needed to up the tone of the game as a whole to provide better contrast between monsters, characters, and the environment in itself. So we're not surprised by the reaction. We expected, we actually expected even a little bit more negative than we got. But because we struggled through the same, things that the player base is seeing now, but we know it's the right direction. We have utter confidence in it. So we don't have any plans to change anything based on that. The other thing, that I would say is that our overall response that we've gotten has also been overwhelmingly positive. So we know very well at Blizzard that we cannot satisfy everyone. Almost every time we make a change to anything, we pretty much have somebody who's really mad about it. So we've kind of learned to live with that.